with Sally Smith, who is the CEO of our locally based Buffalo Wild Wings. Welcome to the studio, Sally.
Thank you, Roshini. It's great to be here.
It's really great to have you. Now, I have to mention this because you're not too far removed from the Buffalo Wild Wings Citrus Bowl. What was that? I know you were down there. What was that experience like for you all?
Well, I'll tell you this. We kicked off the first year sponsorship of the Citrus Bowl, and we couldn't be more thrilled to have the hometown team, University of Minnesota, playing in the bowl. I'll tell you, Orlando was a sea of maroon and gold. Minnesota showed up. I will say that somewhere between 16 and 18,000 fans. I had the opportunity to lead the Minnesota Marching Band and the Rouser at the pep rally the day before. The opportunity to talk with the coach and the assistant coaches and some of the players. It was a lot of fun. Minnesota showed very well, and I couldn't think of a better kickoff to the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl.
Is band conducting now part of the job description that a good CEO really needs to have?
It was funny. I said, well, luckily I took some music lessons so I can at least keep a beat. But no, it was, I'll tell you, they really got the crowd going, and there had to be maybe 2,000 people at this pep rally the day before the bowl.
You know, and I know that it didn't really go the way we wanted it for the Gophers, but it still is such a great event for our local company to be a part of.
Absolutely, and I think that's why we were so thrilled that it was the University of Minnesota. Certainly, I know everyone in town and the whole state would have liked to have seen the Gophers come out on top, but Buffalo Wild Wings will be back there next year, again with the Citrus Bowl, and maybe it'll be a repeat for Minnesota.
All right. Well, there are some amazing facts that I have been learning about Buffalo Wild Wings. Obviously, it's had quite a presence. It started with two guys driven by hunger, I'm told, back in 1981. And then you came on board in 1994. And you've taken it to 1,060 restaurants. I mean, how do you even explain that growth, Sally Smith?
You know, I'm asked that. And sometimes I look at that number and I think, oh, my gosh, what happened? I joined when we had about 30 restaurants, I think Ohio, Indiana, and a couple in Illinois. And I think it was the convergence of the growth in sports, certainly the growth in all sports channels, where you can see any sporting event any time of the day. We started off out as a college bar, and as we moved out, we found that we had a much broader appeal. So we continued to innovate food on the menu. Our first restaurants, actually it was before there was even ESPN, and so we'd have the big screens on and it would be playing MTV. Cable had just come out. Many college students didn't have cable, so they'd come to Buffalo Wild Wings. Well, of course, if the game was on, whether they were in Columbus or Michigan or wherever, they'd say, hey, why don't you turn the game on? And that was really the start of our sports roots, or the emphasis on sports. Now people use us not only to watch the game, but to get together with friends and family. You know I've had children playing in youth sports a long time ago, and we're kind of the place where if you're playing for the weekend or and you're in between games, you can come to Buffalo Wild Wings because we can accommodate a team of 15 or 20 very easily. So we see our audience continuing to grow. And with that, as we continue to open up, whether it's in a metropolitan area or some of the smaller towns we're going into, great reception. People understand what we're doing. It's affordable, and it's a place everyone can enjoy. So in 2010, you announced your first international expansion into Canada. And then this year, the Middle East and the Philippines. Oh, my gosh. I mean, not necessarily the calmest places in the world. No, actually, I just returned from Asia on Friday. I'd been in Korea and Thailand, but we will open in Manila at the end of this month. Very excited about it, a very experienced food operator as well as understanding supply chain. And then Dubai and Saudi Arabia in March. We do have 14 locations in Canada, 5 in Mexico. And just an aside for Mexico, the World Cup was this summer, and I'm getting photos and online streaming of some of the videos taken. There was one of in one of the restaurants in Mexico, and you could not have distinguished that it wasn't in the United States. People really rallied around their teams.
And do you have the same menu in all these different countries?
We do. We'll customize it a little bit. So Canada, we have sweet potato fries up there. We have a couple different sauces. We have a honey garlic up there, which Canadians like, and we will. Certainly, as we move into Asia and India, they like spicier food, and so I'm sure we'll have some additional offerings. Rice will probably be on the menu as well.
I'm talking with Sally Smith. She is the CEO of Buffalo Wild Wings. They currently have 1,060 stores internationally, and her goal is to get up to 1,700 in the next 10 years. A couple little factoids, they call them wing facts, that I want to share with you. Buffalo Wild Wings sold more than 1 billion boneless wings in 2014, and on Super Bowl Sunday last year, it served more than 9.1 million traditional and boneless wings in your restaurants.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
But then, now, can people get these in the stores too?
No, only in restaurant. We have a tremendous amount of carryout. So more than 15% of all sales happen with carryout. But we want to make sure that the wings taste great, that they're served hot. And we've been approached in the past about doing frozen wings in the supermarket, but we really think that it's our signature product. We want to make sure that we maintain that quality that you have when you have it in the restaurant.
I want to talk with you about something that I heard you speak on at the Edina Chamber of Commerce last year, and it really intrigued me because the minimum wage fight was going when I heard you speak. So now it is law. It's coming in phases. I'm wondering your feedback on how you all will bring it in. But what intrigued me was that you said a lot of times restaurant jobs are meant to be starting out jobs, kind of get yourself into the work world, learn some good habits. It's not meant to be a lifelong job, at least a server in a restaurant like yours.
Sure, and I did. And the discussion around minimum wage and wages is one that is a discussion I think we really need to have. I like to think that the restaurant industry trains America's workforce. It's often your first job. I think something like 50% of all people in the United States have worked in a restaurant at one time or another. It's often when you're in high school or college. In fact, more than 40% of our team members are under age 21. So I think of it as learning really good work habits. So showing up on time, showing up presentable, learning to deal with the public, serving, whether you're in the heart of the house, on cooking, if you're greeting, bartender. And there certainly is a huge opportunity to have a career in food service. And I would highly recommend anyone taking a look at it because we're always looking for team members to go into the management training program, obviously opening restaurants going from 1,000 to 1,700, we're going to need some great managers. But it offers that first-time job for youth. And I'm afraid that at a certain point, we'll end up pricing the youth out of the market. And that's my biggest concern,
About raising that wage too high.
It is. And again, if you want a career, there's certainly opportunities and an opportunity to earn a great wage, to be able to support your family. But when you're 16, 17, 18, if it's often spending money. It's money that you're saving to go to college. And what I fear is restaurants will figure out a way to deal with it. Some of it will be automated technology. I've described it as, think about the airline industry. Now, if you can't download your boarding pass on your phone, you're annoyed. If you have to get in line to go see the ticket agent, and I think that's what's going to end up happening over time in the restaurant industry as well. You're going to get used to ordering on a tablet at the table, swiping your card. We'll certainly continue to have servers, waiters and waitresses. You'll still have bartenders, that kind of thing, because we're in the hospitality business. We want to take care of our guests. But what's going to happen is they're probably going to have more tables because you just won't need to provide that service of taking the order and delivering the bill, and you'll start taking care of it yourself.
I'm talking with CEO of Buffalo Wild Wings, Sally Smith, kicking off my Power Talk series this year. We're going to take a quick break, and then I invite you to chat with her. What are your questions? What are your comments? They've got a couple new concepts that are going around the country that they're franchising. We'll hear about that. Plus, about this labor shortage. What's some of her advice? Our number is 651-989-9226 or 866-989-9226. You can also text 81807.
From the Land O'Lakes studio in downtown Minneapolis, this is News Radio 830 WCCO.
Roshini Rajkumar with you. I am talking with Sally Smith in my Power Talk series. She is the CEO of Buffalo Wild Wings. You probably know the company based here. They now have 1,060 stores across the U.S., in Canada, in Mexico, and this month into the Middle East and the Philippines. So it's a great local, what's turned out to be a great local success story. They have 21 signature flavors incorporated into most of their offerings. But I want to open the phone lines to you. I'm going to ask Sally to give you some free advice for job seekers. There are jobs out there, and she would love to help you. Not often do you get to talk directly with the CEO about that. Our number is 651-989-9226. 866-989-9226. You can also text 81807. So, Sally, you don't really have a favorite flavor of sauce, do you?
It depends on what I'm eating. I like all of our sauces. You know, the spicy ones I can only take in moderation. But if I'm eating our popcorn shrimp, I love our Asian Zing. We've incorporated Asian Zing into one of our salad dressings as well. If I have a wrap, I like our Southwestern Ranch or perhaps our honey barbecue. So I get you get a craving for one of the flavors, and whatever I'm craving is what I'll usually have.
CCO listeners are very big into philanthropy. They've given to our radiothons. They're just generous people. And Buffalo Wild Wings, you started this Team Up for Kids program just a couple years ago. Tell people what that's all about.
Sure. Well, we've partnered with the Boys and Girls Clubs of the United States, and actually it's carried over into Mexico as well, where we have raised money in our restaurants with our guests and with our team members across the country, franchisees included. I think we've raised $1.8 million in the couple of years that we've been going. And we sponsor various sporting programs at each of the individual clubs. So our first year, we sponsored, the uniforms and some of the coaching for flag football as well as competitive cheerleading. And because we've been able to raise, and I think we provided that to 1,600 or 1,800 clubs last year, because we've been able, the kind of dollars we've been able to raise, we're able to now expand that to basketball for both boys and girls. And I think the number of clubs we'll be sponsoring is close to 2,400 clubs in the United States. In addition to providing the funds for the uniforms and these games, we also have team members across the country that volunteer and spend time at the clubs. I know at our home office, we about once a quarter will go over to the Jerry Gamble Club, whoever's available. We take our wingmobile, so it might be a lunchtime treat where we're able to provide wings and just work with the kids. Sometimes tell our stories and really get to know them, and that happens not only in Minneapolis but throughout the country. In connection with our bowl game, we were able to provide a donation of $10,000 to one of the clubs in Orlando. So it travels well, and it aligns with us, and we believe that there's a champion in every kid, and if you are a champion in every child, and what greater way to learn sportsmanship than being part of a team.
Right, and your guests can help with this effort, right?
They certainly can. We have one large fundraiser a year, and I think that's in September or October. Well, actually, it's ongoing. If you buy a bottle of sauce in restaurant, a portion of what you pay, I think it's 50 cents or $1 per bottle, goes toward the Boys and Girls Clubs. And so essentially, we don't make any money on our sauces, but it's rather the way we fundraise. And so buy sauces and seasonings, and you'll be supporting Boys and Girls Clubs.
Well, and it does seem that studies bear out when young people are involved in sports, they get into less trouble, there's less crime, they just learn lifelong good habits. So it's really fantastic that you've partnered with Boys and Girls Clubs. And I understand you sort of have a new layer angle on this year coming up with expanding the sports.
By expanding, again, we've been very successful at fundraising, and we'll do fundraisers at the home office. We have something called the Spirit Squad, and so they'll come up with ways to raise money for not only the local club, but as part of our commitment to the greater Boys and Girls Clubs. And as I mentioned, adding basketball and the support of basketball teams throughout the United States. You're right. I think research does show that being part of something and keeps kids out of trouble, gives them something to believe in, gives them, team members that count on them, and it's a win for us and a win for them.
Because I have you here, I would love for you to give advice to people out there that we are in a bit of a labor crisis in the state of Minnesota. Not sure the latest levels on this labor shortage, but your advice for people who are out there looking for work, really at all levels, from the minimum wage level way on up to your level, people looking for jobs. What's your best advice for them to put their best foot forward?
Sure. I have the opportunity to speak to college classes, not only here but around the country, and I get asked that question a lot. I think the first thing is, I always tell people, you don't have to find the perfect job. Sometimes that starting job, whether it's in the restaurant or somewhere else, you think, gee, I'm overqualified, can turn into that perfect job. So and your first job isn't always your last job. I always talk about the importance of really working hard and, showing up. I had the opportunity, this is a funny story, when I became CEO because the person we hired didn't show up that Monday at Buffalo Wild Wings.
Because were you CFO at the time?
I was CFO, and we'd hired someone to be the CEO. And so someone made the quip, gee, maybe the first step is just showing up. So when I say show up, I say, come ready to work. Be willing to learn something. And, I'm a curious person. I do a lot of reading, and I think that makes for a very attractive employee. When I'm talking with employees or potential applicants, I talk about what they like to do, and are they curious? Do they have a sense of wanting to know how things work? So, again, it doesn't have to be your perfect job, because sometimes that entry-level job can lead to that perfect job through the education and the development you get on the job.
And like you said, your manager training program puts someone who may or may not have had a college education even in a position to run a $4 million store.
Right. That's the great thing about the restaurant industry, is it's one of the few industries where you don't have to have a college education to succeed. And I think there's just tremendous opportunity for young adults in their 20s, if they've started, starting as a greeter or as a cashier, and then moving into management development programs, training programs. You start off with a team lead, and then an hourly lead, a shift lead, and then you move into management. And it's exciting. You touch on all aspects of the job. It's not easy to be a manager of a restaurant, but you're kind of doing everything. So it's like running your own small business.
Well, thank you so much, Sally Smith, for being in studio today, for helping us kick off the Power Talk series. It's just been quite a pleasure having you in, and good luck to you with all these things going on.
Thanks, Roshini. It's always nice to be able to talk about Buffalo Wild Wings. It's something I'm passionate about, and I appreciate you taking the time to have me on your show.
You are welcome, and we definitely can feel that passion. And next month, the Power Talk series continues, and you will get to meet one of the highest level people in the medical world in the state of Minnesota. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the bad boys in the NFL.
You're listening to News and Views on News Radio 830 WCCO.
Looking out for
Roshini Rajkumar with you. Thanks for spending part of your Sunday here with me on WCCO Radio. Your team may be out when it comes to the NFL. I know my team is, the Vikings, long out, very sad. Maybe, there's always next year. But there was no shortage this season of controversies in the NFL, whether it was the Ravens or the Vikings or the Cardinals. There were so many different things happening that continue to stretch our minds about what more could happen. Well, guess what? Another shoe dropped this past week when the Colts, the Indianapolis Colts that are in the AFC Championship game today, when Josh McNary was charged with rape stemming from an early December incident. I am going to get into sort of the science behind why we as fans keep on supporting the NFL. So really, it's about us, and I would love for you to weigh in. The phone lines will be open this entire half hour. The text line, 81807. Let me introduce my panel. Our regular contributor, Steve Silton. He's a sports and business law attorney with the national law firm Cozen O'Connor. And Professor Doug Hartman, new to the studio today. He's a professor of sociology at the University of Minnesota. Welcome, gentlemen.
It's great to be here, Roshini.
And it is nice to have you both here. Steve, let's start with you because you are the practicing attorney. These charges come down. How can you even make sense out of it against McNary?
Yeah, it's another one of these kind of allegations, which we've got to be very clear. He's been charged with criminal confinement, of rape, and all these issues. He hasn't been convicted of anything, and under the American judicial system, as we all know, you're innocent until proven guilty. I mean, what's kind of tragic about this individual is this guy had lived a pretty stellar life. He was a West Point grad, had a pretty successful NFL career while he was simultaneously serving out his duties to the United States National Guard.
And he continues to be a reservist.
Yeah, completely. And that being said, and we can talk about this later, as teams have been doing, particularly this year, he's immediately suspended. He's not going to participate in what's probably the most important game of the year for his team. And as we used to say, in anybody who's played football at all, is aware of the concept of next man up, which is somebody goes down, whether it's injury or suspension or for whatever reason, whoever is behind him immediately becomes kind of the player to take his position. And it's an interesting part of football, which I was talking to Professor Hartman in the green room prior to this segment, which is unique to football and is very, very different than, say, the NBA or basketball or hockey or baseball.
All right, I want to bring in Professor Doug Hartman. He's a professor of sociology at the U of M. You've also written extensively about kind of race and culture, the black athlete, and certainly the controversies are colorblind. They're black and white in the NFL. Both races have been charged. What is your take on all of this, Professor?
Well, there's an issue about which athletes are getting kind of called out on this. And on the race front, I do think there's kind of some troubling dynamics about the athletes that are getting accused of this and how they're kind of treated in the media. One of the questions I think that you posed in kind of thinking about this segment was, why is it that fans still continue to really support their teams and follow the sport, and even in some of these cases still support the individual athletes even when they've been accused of things. And there's, I think, two things I want to put in the conversation on that are important to think about, and it's two really different and almost contradictory things. One is we do have this legacy in the Western world, in the U.S., of thinking about athletes as role models and heroes, and so it's hard to see people who we've thought of as role models and heroes break those rules, break those norms, let us down in a way. And so I think we're often really cautious about that. The other thing about sports, though, is kind of the opposite side, which is that we want sports as a distraction. We don't want it to be about all this serious stuff, about complicated social issues and dynamics. And so we want a diversion. And so we don't want to be troubled. So that makes it really hard to deal with these kinds of issues.
You know, race is an interesting issue to bring up, Professor Hartman, because I do think it's interesting that the NFL has become the most African-American league in American sports, even more so than the NBA with the kind of the influx of Eastern European players. And I think as that has happened, because that wasn't always the case, you do incidentally, and maybe this correlation has no causation, you have this kind of greater emphasis on personal conduct that you had when the league was 50% Caucasian, or even in the 60s and 70s when it was the majority Caucasian. And that's an interesting topic. I don't know if Roshini exactly wants to go into it today, but
we certainly can.
I do think it's a really, really, really interesting issue. But I do think that what always amazes me, and you look at the Colts have had two major scandals this year. Not only the Josh McCrary scandal, but also their owner, Jim Irsay, who's one of the most well-known owners in the NFL. He was involved in, his father was involved in bringing the Colts from Baltimore to Indianapolis, and he was very vocal about getting rid of Peyton Manning and inserting the number one pick Andrew Luck, and he had his own personal scandal, that being multiple DUIs and some personal behavior issues, and obviously I don't think people are not watching this weekend, Indiana Colts fans. I don't think that will have any impact on their cheering for the Colts to prevail against their nemesis, New England.
And Steve, that said, Coach Jim Irsay, who was suspended, you are correct, last year for several of the games for this season, 6 games after his case settled. He said, it's obviously unfortunate, quote, he told USA Today Sports on Friday, we'll see what develops. And he says that he doesn't think the arrest of Josh McNary on these rape charges will be much of a distraction in this AFC Championship game against the Pats.
And I think you're probably right. I mean, again, it goes back to this kind of next man up type of
But that's
mentality.
crazy. Why? I mean, doesn't that, just as another Colt, Professor, isn't there some sort of sense of propriety and the brand, and wow, you're bringing a bad name on the brand, and we're the Colts too, the rest of the team?
Yeah, well, I think he's probably talking about the team playing the game. And I think professional athletes and teams have a real unique ability to focus and try to eliminate the rest of the world to focus on the game. So I think my guess is that's what he's talking about. But I think the outrage that you're kind of feeling is us, the fans, the followers who support these teams in this sport, even when there's instances of behavior that has really got to be troubling for us.
Yeah, and the league is taking these allegations more seriously. You look at even the progression from the Ray Rice allegations. They weren't allegations. They were proven out about domestic abuse of his spouse, and see how they dealt with the Adrian Peterson issue here locally, essentially suspending him for the year without any conviction. As we all know with Ray Rice, he acknowledged his conduct and pled to a criminal charge and was suspended for only 2 games. Then, of course, the videotape came out, and as I said, what did people think domestic abuse was going to look like? It was horrific. It was horrible. It was unforgivable. And the public and the NFL said, listen, the 2 games wasn't enough, even though, you acknowledge this all, we're going to suspend you for the season, it's a little hypocritical for Jim Irsay to get suspended 6 games when he does not have a career that's finite. And for a guy like Ray Rice, as I say, their careers are 3 to 5 years. When you take away a career, you're essentially taking away 10, 20, 30% of their
But then it does
ability
come
to
back
work.
to the behavior, and that's what I want to get into. I want to open up the phone lines and have you weigh in. Those numbers, 651-989-9226 or 866-989-9226. You can also text 81807 for my panel of Steve Silton and Professor Doug Hartman. We're talking about kind of the sociology, the science behind why we as fans continue to support these players, this league, as some of you are even getting ready to watch these championship bouts today. We'll talk about that, but we'll first take a quick break.
News Radio 830 WCCO, Minnesota's official weather station.
We're winding down our time with our panel of sports and business law attorney Steve Silton. Professor Doug Hartman, you are welcome to share with us, 81807, if you have any questions. Steve, the NFL, you point out, is a $9 billion and growing industry. That's our money we keep giving.
Yeah, but it's also integral to our overall U.S. economy. I mean, this is the only sport. Lots of sports have had labor issues. The NHL had a recent one. The NBA had a recent one. But this is the only one where the President of the United States, who's not necessarily a football fan, as we all know he's a big basketball fan, took time out of his busy day and was willing to burn political capital to weigh in on that particular issue. It's incredibly important to our economy. It's also important to our regional psyche. I think even more so than other sports. I think the NFL, when teams are doing well and when they're playing, we all have something to rally around. As Professor Hartman says, it's a necessary distraction, and it's incredibly important. Our United States would not be the same country, in my opinion, without professional football.
Well, yeah, and that's the whole thing. Professor Hartman, these players are representatives of not only their team, but of their cities, their states, their regions.
Absolutely. When I reflect on this, I think why we have such kind of powerful and complicated reactions is because on the one hand, we want it to be not a big deal, just something that's fun and games. On the other hand, we have so much invested in these teams and these players representing our communities and also our better selves. I mean, that's the whole role model hero kind of ideal that we've built around sports. And so I think that's part of why we get these complicated responses, is because we're caught in these contradictory things about sports and about football where we want to have our cake and eat it too. We want it to be fun and games and not matter, yet it really is important in economic terms, in social terms, in terms of our heroes and role models.
All right. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, that football, unique in my opinion from other sports, is really about the team and not the players. You look at the Adrian Peterson situation locally, and the number 28 jerseys were the jerseys last year for Minnesota.